to Trackops. I'm your host today. I'm Trackops, and today we're gonna quickly run through creating an expense on a case. So I'm on my case here in my system, and I just worked on this case, provided a surveillance or did some other action on this case, and I worked some hours. I incurred some mileage, and I want to submit that expense and timesheet to my bosses, to my management team so they can field my time that I worked on this particular event, maybe for this particular day. And what I can do is I can submit a new expense entry inside Trackops on that case to my management staff so they can field those hours that I'm submitting to them. So to do that, I'm going to do that directly from my case. So I'm on the overview tab of my case here for John Doe, and I have my expenses tab here. And so if I select my expenses tab, I can then click new expense entry and submit my time on this case. So once I click new expense entry, I can see that my staff name is already automatically selected. I'm already inside the case, so the case is automatically tagged. At this point, I can select an expense date. So, I work this weekend, maybe on Sunday, and I want to submit that to my team. And if I have an activity, so if I was assigned to an event or a task or, surveillance event, something of that nature, and I want to tag that event to this expense entry to say, hey, on this activity that you assigned me, this surveillance, I, worked 8 hours, drove 100 miles, whatever it may be. So once I select my activity, if I have one, I can then submit my items. So you notice that on the entry here, there are two sections. There are time items for my hourly items, so work hours, for instance. And then I've got my expense items down here. These are going to be my fixed rate items or my variable rate items, such as mileage or hotel or a toll or a meal, something like that. And when I select those, I can then put in my quantity. So on my work hours, how many hours did I work today? Once I have that, I've got my 8 hours, I've got my rate, and then I've got my total here. And then I've got my expense items section. So I've selected mileage. So how many miles did I drove? Let's say 100 miles on this day. It was a long day, and I drove 100 miles, and I'm going to get reimbursed from my team for that. So now that I've got those two items selected, I can review. If I had a receipt here, so let's say that, when I drove, maybe I got a gas receipt, or if there were other items, it's a hotel, it's a toll road, or whatever it may be, and you have a receipt for any of those items, you can upload an image of those here, a PDF if you've created them, something like that. And then once I'm done, I can go ahead and click Save Expense Entry, and now I've submitted my expense entry to my staff, to my management team regarding this case. You'll notice that it's now awaiting review. So now when your manager logs back in, they'll likely be notified on their dashboard or somewhere else that they've got a new expense entry awaiting review, and they will come in behind you and either approve or decline that expense entry. And so at this point, there's nothing left for you to do. Once it's approved, you can come back and review that. If it's declined, you'll receive a notice for that as well to say, hey, your expense entry is declined. Other than that, you're good to go. If you need to submit another expense entry, you can go back to the expenses tab of that case and submit another entry. If you have an update to submit after this entry, you can go ahead and do that too quickly from this expense entry, submitting an update for that entry. If you have any other questions about expense entries or anything like that, feel free to reach out to us at support@trackops.com, and we'll get your question as quickly as possible. Thanks again for using Trackops.